Hello again, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club here, and we're continuing our series with kings and pawns in the endgame. And today we're going to talk about a concept called Trébuchet and also another concept called Zugzwang. Now, Trébuchet is a maneuvering technique that puts the opponent into Zugzwang, allowing you to win. So what is Zugzwang? Such a fun word. Keep in mind that chess is over 1,000 years old, and it's had some wonderful points in history. One of them in Germany, where Zugzwang, I believe, is where that word came from. I think Trébuchet sounds like it came from France, but I'm not really sure. So Zugzwang is the concept where both sides have their pieces exactly where they want them, and whoever's turn it is to move has to give ground. And so they are said to be in Zugzwang, where they have to give up something because they're forced to move. So here we can see that each king is next to their pawns. They're protecting their pawns, attacking the enemy pawn, and whoever's turn it is to move is going to lose. And so that's the concept of Zugzwang. So let's take a look at what Zugzwang looks like. In this case, white is in Zugzwang because it's white's turn to move. And what we can see is that black's pawn is covering this square right here. And that's the square that white would need to move to stay close to his pawn. And so he can't get there. If white moves anywhere else, black is simply going to capture this pawn. So we see white is concerned about that. Well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next is that black is going to queen his pawn. So there's the battle, and we can see it play out here. White makes the only move he can towards the bottom side of the board, trying to get out in front. And what's white to do here? White could try to maybe come up here and attack the pawn, but then black's just going to simply march the pawn, so that's not going to work. So white's trying to get out in front, but if you saw our videos on opposition, you notice that black's king is already in the critical squares, 2 squares out in front of his pawn. So there is nothing that white can do. Black is going to seize the queening square, and it's coming. There's just nothing white can do here. So it's lost. So if we take the same position, but with it being black's turn to move, well, it's the same idea. Black really needs to stay in this square to stay next to his pawn, but unfortunately, white's pawn has it covered. So when black moves and tries to stop the queening, the exact same thing happens. White claims the queening square, and there's nothing he can do. So what is this idea of Trébuchet? Well, when we have 2 pawns that are adjacent to one another, the idea is the first king to make contact can force this position here. This position with the opponent to move is called Trébuchet. So let's take a look at that in a different position. This might be more reminiscent of what a game might look like, where we've got our blockaded pawns here, and we're trying to figure out and calculate who's going to make contact first and how do they cause Trébuchet. So we can see that when white captures this pawn and black captures this pawn, that black is going to be physically closer with only 1 square away, as where white is going to be 2 squares away. So black has the opportunity to touch the pawns first. So white captures his pawn, black captures his pawn, white moves, and now, because black gets to touch the pawns first, he can cause Trébuchet. But it's not that simple. Black has to be very careful. Does black want to enter this square or this square? Go ahead and pause the video for a moment, try to calculate it, and discover which move black has to make so that he can cause the Trébuchet position with white to move so that white loses. Okay, hopefully you figured it out. And the answer is here, because white has to get next to his pawn. Black is threatening to capture this pawn, and white needs to defend it, and white can only do it from this square. So once white enters into that square, black can now cause the Trébuchet position with the opponent to move. So once white makes his move, we can see that black has entered the critical squares for opposition, and white could try to step back and attack that pawn. Black can easily defend. And again, there's the queening square. White could try to attack, but there's just nothing to do here. So it's very, very important to be able to calculate from a long-range distance who's going to touch the pawn first. But what if black had made the critical error of stepping here because he remembered that in Trébuchet he wanted to be next to both pawns? Well, the problem is that when white comes in, now it's black to move, and the person who has to move is in Zugzwang because they don't want to move, and so now white gets to win. So black has to be very, very careful that when he's going to be the first to touch down, choosing the right square. So you don't want to enter immediately next to the two pawns. What you want to do is attack the opponent's pawn, force the opponent to defend, then create the Trébuchet. This puts your opponent into Zugzwang, they're forced to move, and you get to win. Okay, so let's take another look at this position here. It's kind of similar. This is more likely to happen in a game, and it's not exactly Trébuchet, but it is sort of a Zugzwang position. So let's see here. If black moves, the question is, where should black move to? Is this game won, or is this game drawn? If black steps here and white takes the pawn, I hope you can see that black has claimed the opposition. If you don't know what the opposition is, please check out our videos on opposition and also distant opposition and the rectangular method. But we can see here that black can hold off the king, forcing white to move the pawn, stay in front, forcing white to move the pawn, stay in front, and this is a drawn position. Black gets to get in front, and as you can see, black's not in check, but he has no legal moves, and so what's he to do but have a draw? But what if, let's take this back, what if in this position, black made the mistake of stepping in front of the pawn? This allows white to seize the opposition, and again, we can see that white has entered the critical squares, 2 squares in front of his pawn and to either side, and there's nothing black can do here. White has claimed the queening square, and this queen is coming. So it's very, very important to know about opposition as well as the other concepts. So let's change it here now. Here, black loses even though he's going to have the opposition. Let's see how that works. Black does his special move, claiming the opposition. And this looks like, again, that similar drawn maneuver. But what's going on here? Black is forced to move. Why? Because white now has the opposition. See, when black claimed the opposition, white moved the pawn, and now he has the opposition, forcing black in front of the pawn early. Now, in this position, if it were white's turn to move, then it would be a draw. But unfortunately, it's black's turn to move, and he has an available square. Once he steps out, white claims the queening square, and the queen is coming. So it's sort of an optical illusion. What if we have this similar position? Black claims the opposition. White tries to step away from it. Black stays in front. Black claims the opposition. White's not making any progress. But again, black's in front. There's the draw. So very, very interesting. How is that different? The difference is, as these pieces are moving, and we get here, take a look at this position. If it's white to move, it's a draw. If it's black to move, white's going to win. The reason that it's a draw is that white had to move. But if black had to move, then white would claim the queening square. Well, I hope that helps you understand the basics of Trébuchet, a little bit more about opposition, and you heard a new word today, Zugzwang, which means everyone's pieces is exactly where they want to be. Nobody wants to move, and whoever is forced to move is to be said in Zugzwang, which means they have to give ground, which causes them to lose. Well, until next time, this is Zach Wilson with the Hood County Chess Club. Please subscribe to our channel, visit us on Facebook, like our page, and we'll see you real soon.